viewers, and welcome to Political Scope. My name is Stacey Carmichael James, and with me this evening is Minister of Human Services and Social Security, the Honorable Jennifer Webster. Good afternoon, Minister, and how are you today?
Thank you. I'm fine, and it's a pleasure to be here
It's a
this
pleasure
evening.
having you. Well, today we will be discussing some developments in the social sector. And before we go in depth, could you give us a general synopsis of some of the developments that have taken place in Guyana in terms of social sector?
Well, first of all, let me say that since I've assumed office as the Minister of Human Services, over the past 3 years, we have continued along a pathway where we've seen as a government, the PPPC government, continuing to work towards improving the quality of life of every Guyanese by our programs in the social sector. And I think our primary focus has been to continue and to improve upon what programs we have implemented. And I think that the PPPC's track record as a government is quite exceptional in many respects because we've seen in Guyana more persons benefiting in many ways. And if I were to give you an example, let's take, for example, our pensioners, if I were to start there. Our pensioners today enjoy numerous benefits, and this has all been made possible by the PPPC administration. And I would say this because we've seen increases annually, 2012, 2013, 2014, in the old age pension. Today, a pensioner receives the sum of $13,125 as compared to many years ago. And pensioners also now receive the annual subsidies, the electricity subsidy in the sum of $30,000 per annum. And those pensioners who are in receipt of that subsidy are the holders of accounts with GPL. And so we have that, and then pensioners also benefit. For those in Georgetown, they receive a water subsidy, and those in the urban areas also receive that subsidy. And I must say that many of our pensioners are quite grateful and are quite happy that they have been able to have access to all these social safety nets that are being made available to them in the sector. And more so, if I were to give an example, our projections this year will see us helping and assisting about 47,000 pensioners. That is our approximation, and it could be a little more because people are living longer now. And there are many reasons for that too, if one were to link it by extension, because the social sector encompasses the health sector, education, and social services, and labor. And people now have access to more facilities. We have more doctors who have come back, who have been trained in Cuba and who are working in all our hospitals across the country. And by extension, too, we have more facilities. We have more health centers in the communities that are being manned by trained and qualified personnel. And people are now living longer. Life expectancy rates have increased. And it tells a story that because of this, we as a country can look forward to greater contributions by our people in society at all levels. And I think it is significant. And this is as a result of planning and projections and having a vision for Guyana and its people.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now, before we go any further, what about Region 2? We're curious to know about developments taking place in the different regions. Can we zoom into Region 2?
Okay. So far in Region 2, about 2,897 pensioners have received their pension books for 2015. In Region 2, we are also working through the ministry. We are providing support to another vulnerable group, and that is to the community-based rehab group in Region 2, whereby through the ministry we provide financial assistance to support them with their transportation costs for those persons who are differently abled. And this is another way of our government working and recognizing and giving their commitment to providing support to persons who are differently abled within our society. And as you know, Guyana has signed on to the convention, and we are mandated to provide services to those persons. And that is why that we have recognized that we must provide services so that those persons will be able to enjoy similar access to all facilities like every other Guyanese. So basically, there's no discrimination against differently able persons, and more so in Region 2.
Okay then. And what about the development of women? Now we know the social sector is broad and there are many areas, but women have also sometimes been very vulnerable. What is the ministry doing to assist women in Region 2 specifically?
Well, in Region 2, we also have a Regional Women's Affairs Committee. And the Regional Women's Affairs Committee, by extension, is part of the Women's Affairs Bureau of the ministry. And the Women's Affairs Bureau is the body, the national machinery that is mandated to implement programs for the development and continued empowerment of women across our country. And this really is in accordance with international obligations at the UN, the CEDAW, which clearly specifies that every country has to have a national machinery responsible for implementing programs for women. And let us go back a little. In 2010, we had launched the Women of Worth program. We're now in 2015. And I am happy to say that the Women of Worth program has seen lots of success. We've had our fair share of challenges in some of the implementation, but nevertheless, I'm proud to say that many women in Region 2 have been able to access loans through the Guyana Bank for Trade and Industry to help them in small business enterprise development. Many of them now are second, third, and fourth term borrowers, and they are continuing to expand their business ventures, and also many of them are looking at other areas to enter. And we have women in many categories. We have women in catering, in poultry rearing, in agriculture, in garment manufacture, cosmetology, and those are some of the skills that some of those women have pursued, and there are many others. And I think that this year will be 5 years since that program has been in place. And we are working with the Guyana Bank for Trade and Industry to continue that program and to look at other ways of providing opportunities for women. And very shortly, we will be undertaking more training for women so that those women who are accessing new loans will be able to be equipped and to be able to manage their finances in a prudent way so that their business ventures would be successful. The idea is to have a successful outcome.
Okay, thank you. Still touching on women in terms of domestic violence. Let's say a woman in Region 2 may be abused or whatever. Where can she go in within that region to get help or any kind of assistance?
Well, within that region, we do have the regional support services and the regional mechanisms. And through the regional women's affairs committees, the women can do that. And also we do have a hotline, and which is manned especially to um, take reports of women who are abused. Through the Child Care and Protection Agency, there's also the hotline to report reports of abuse of children. And those reports are usually investigated. And also, we do have the Guyana Police Force, so we should not leave out law enforcement, because the law enforcement officials play a very key role also. And as a government, we have always said that we do have zero tolerance for these issues. And we will continue to place emphasis on issues pertaining to violence against women in our country, because we recognize as a government that violence against women knows no color, no class, no creed, no ethnicity, and it is an issue that should be of concern to all Guyanese.
Thank you. And not forgetting the men, I know there's a men's affair bureau. How has that arm of the ministry been functioning over the years? And are you also satisfied with the work that is being done by that bureau?
I am very satisfied. The Men's Affairs Bureau, since its establishment in 2010, has been working with men and boys across Guyana, and they are making a difference. And again, I will say that under the PPPC government, this was one of the areas, after a training was done with faith-based organizations, FBOs, and religious leaders, working with men. And this was one of the recommendations which was adopted by the government. And the Men's Affairs Bureau has been working, they've been meeting men in their own spaces, as we would say, going to the barbershops, wherever men are, and interacting with them. And they have been having programs like every year there's a men's week, and there are a number of activities. They've been working with our boys in schools and speaking to them about violence, and working with them so that many of them could emulate to be good and upstanding gentlemen when they grow up, because it's important that we work with our boys to cultivate better habits, and for them to understand that violence as a whole should have no place in society.
Thank you. Also, Minister, I wanted to raise this with you, child protection. How has that area? I know this is a very important area for the ministry, and you've been focusing on it a lot. But we cannot overstate, and we could not stop questioning. How is the ministry functioning in that area?
Well, the Child Care and Protection Agency, I must first and foremost commend the frontline officers. We do have officers now in all the regions, in all 10 administrative regions, and that has been the PPPC's policy. And in executing the mandate given, we have ensured that officers are placed in all regions. And child abuse, we've seen the number of cases and reports increasing. But let's look at it in a positive way. The reports are increasing because, as a government, we have seen the need to sensitize our people about the adverse effects of child abuse. And that is why now there are reports on a daily basis. And I want to assure everyone that these reports are being investigated. And we've seen cases where children are neglected. They have been left at home alone, which is against the law, because we do have an act called the Protection of Children's Act, which was enacted and which specifies that our children should not be left unattended nor unsupervised. And we've seen many cases of that in our society. We've seen in our society a couple of children, a few isolated incidences of children who have been left unattended at home and for whom neighbors have had to report to the Child Care and Protection Agency. And you've seen and you must have heard about the agency going and taking the children and placing the children in institutional care because of the lack of parental care and guidance. And in Guyana, we should, as a country, as a people, be committed, regardless of what political affiliation we have, to recognize that child protection is everybody's business. As a government, as a member of the government, as a minister working to better the quality of lives of all Guyanese, I feel very passionately that we have stood our ground and we will continue to do what is right for the people of Guyana.
Thank you, Minister. Another question. In terms of trafficking in persons, it's still a concern, and there was concerns raised about trafficking in persons in interior locations, and also views that the police force is not doing enough for that. Could you give us, from a ministry perspective, what are some of the measures being put in place for specifically interior locations?
Well, the ministry, in accordance with the mandate in the Trafficking in Persons Act, is a member of the National Task Force. And the National Task Force, which is chaired by the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs, the Honorable Clement Rohi, has a national action plan. And the Trafficking in Persons Department of the ministry has been partnering with NGOs, with officials of the Guyana Police Force, representatives of the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, and going into mining communities and conducting sensitization and awareness sessions and teaching persons who reside in those communities, in those hinterland communities, how to identify a victim of trafficking in persons. Identification is very important. And I think that the more the populace is sensitized about this issue of trafficking in persons, which really is a very horrible issue. It is referred to as modern-day slavery. And the work that is being done, one could concede that you will at some point in time see a reduction in the number of cases of trafficking. But just recently we've had prosecution. Just recently a woman was charged on this whole issue of harboring these girls. And I feel very strongly that we will continue to work in hinterland communities, and we will continue through our hotline to investigate every report that is received through the department as we seek to work together for Guyana. And of course, trafficking in persons is one of the issues that at the international level has always been on the front burner. And the government of Guyana has always seen the need to work, and we have said publicly that all perpetrators will be prosecuted. So, and we will continue to do that. And we will continue to sensitize the public, sensitize our young people. We are working in schools. During last year, the department visited a number of schools throughout the country and conducted sensitization awareness in secondary schools on this issue.
Okay. And what are some of the policies and or programs that we can expect in 2015 that will further enhance the development, social sector development?
Well, there are a number of plans, and of course, we are preparing as a country to go to elections on May the 11th. So, implementation of programs right now will see the continuation of programs that were not completed in 2014. And we plan to try as far as possible to ensure that we continue our community outreach activities, because as a ministry there's greater demand for the services we provide throughout the country, and we are committed to doing that. We are committed to ensuring that every Guyanese has access to the services we provide in the social sector.
Thank you. Any closing remarks before we wrap up this evening on social sector development?
I would like to say that as a government, the PPPC is committed to working to ensuring that the progress and development that we have seen in Guyana continues and moves, and that Guyana as a country will continue to move ahead, to make greater strides as a nation as we work together for peace, progress, and prosperity in our country.
Thank you very much, Minister. It was a pleasure having you today on Political Scope. I do look forward to another interview where we could examine more in depth the social sector development, because it's a very broad area and there are still some areas that we will touch on. But in the interest of time, I want to thank you for joining me on Political Scope.
Thank you, and it has been a pleasure being here.
Thank you, Minister. And thank you, viewers, for staying tuned with us. It was Political Scope. My name is Stacey Carmichael James. Do join us again.